Okay, welcome along to the next in the series of the GigCX Decoded podcast, where we dive into the world of gig-based customer service, or what we always call GigCX. And this podcast is brought to you by Limitless. I'm your host. I'm Chris Dumpleton. I have the pleasure of leading the sales and market efforts here at the good ship Limitless. And on this podcast, we are here to explore the world of GigCX and help people understand a bit more about it. And the way that we do that is we bring people on far cleverer than myself, and I ask them a bunch of questions. And today is no exception. And like the episode, I think 2 before this time we've gone big and we've brought 2 people on. So I'm really excited today to be joined by David Creech, who we'll call Creech for reasons that Creech knows, and Dennis Pollett at a little company called Microsoft, which you may have heard of along the way. Dennis, I believe you're a senior product manager at Microsoft, and Creech, you are in the community support planner for the Microsoft Answers community, which is quite a long title. But anyway, pleasure to have you on the show, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for being here.
You bet.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So let's get into the discussion. So firstly, let's just get a bit of understanding about you and your role and what you do. So Dennis, I'm going to come to you first. So can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do at the wonderful
Sure.
Microsoft?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a long time Microsoft employee, so I've been here about 33 years. So the tail end of the career, but I spent the last 10 or 15 years in online support strategy, and specifically probably the last 10 to 12 years in community and social strategy, and customer service. So our team that Creech and I and a couple other folks are on, who are kind of a small team, we manage the strategy and day-to-day running of the Microsoft Answers support community, which serves about 1 billion customers a year. It's a huge online site. So it's big traffic, one of the largest community forum sites, first-party sites in the world, I think.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. Some great stats going around. So you say a billion, is that 1 billion like individual questions, or is it 1 billion individual?
No, it's 1 billion customers, because we have a lot of customers who come and look at the content and then find their answer and leave. And then we have about, I'd say 500,000 to 600,000 new questions every year.
That's amazing. They are some huge numbers. Well, we're going to get into that a bit more detail. Creech, yourself, if you could do a brief intro, it'd be really helpful.
Sure. Yeah, I've been at Microsoft about 5 years, all of it on this team, although I guess I've done 3 different roles here, covered 3 different parts of the team. I've got about 30 years of operations and quality experience in a variety of industries around the world, but primarily software and banking.
And we were just having a quick chat offline before we came on live, and I found out that you've never listened to a podcast in your life. And it was just a sort of casual thing. I thought I'd just break the ice a bit and say, I was expecting you to say, yeah, I listen to loads, I'm on loads, I get asked to do this thing loads. And it's like, yeah, this is the first one I've ever been on, and the first one I've ever, I mean, hopefully you'll listen to this one back. I mean, that's going to be your first one, right?
I'm not going to promise anything.
Creech is about as subtle as a rock.
Brilliant. Well, this is going to be one of my favorite conversations, because I much prefer those. They're better to listen to as well when you get back to it. Right. Okay. So first big question is, I chuck GigCX around like confetti, and I realize that sometimes people may not actually fully understand what it is. Now, rather than me try and constantly sell it all the time, which people get very, very bored about, I thought I'd ask you to say, how would you describe it? So, Dennis, I'm going to ask you first. So someone comes along and they say, GigCX, heard about this. What on earth is it? How would you describe it to them?
Oh, I was going to punt that one to Creech, but it's using a gig and gig workers in a customer service world, of course, which can take a lot of different permutations, and depending on what environment and business you're in, it can run the gamut from being really simple to really complex. And so I think ours is a little bit on the higher end, I'd say, Creech.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Some of our stuff gets pretty complex.
Right. So now, not only have we brought Microsoft on to this call, but we have the pleasure of calling you one of our customers, which is a wonderful accolade to have. So the first question I thought would be really useful to ask is, in your own your own words. And Dennis, I'll come to you for this one because that was where our relationship started. Is why did you adopt GigCX in the first place into your part of the business?
Yeah, we were a really early adopter in this space 6 years ago, I guess, and we started out small and piloted it. And what we were trying to achieve was actually either more customer success, higher level of customer success, or cost savings. We thought, hey, this is a fascinating world that we might be able to try, and it might be better quality and it might be less expensive than some of the higher paid local language advocates we had. And so gave it a shot. It was actually wildly successful. We were both actually much more cost effective and much more successful from a customer perspective. So that's what we were after. And we just kept expanding the reach of that. And we're now we use Gig in lots of different languages across all of our product lines. We had a mix of customer agents, paid customer agents that would sit in customer contact centers and they would answer questions, along with a really rich, big group of volunteers who had a lot of subject matter expertise, and they contributed their expertise just to helping people, altruism based, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And so we thought, hey, let's get a third leg of the stool in there and do this gig thing because we have so much volume. We're so big, we're growing. How do we handle this in a positive way? And so we tried the gig experience out, and it was great.
So you said at the start there, so initially it was you wanted you were interested in one of two things, which was either to reduce the cost or to improve CSAT, and it sounds like you got both. So you've got the classic win-win. Okay, brilliant. Well, I'm pleased that that's worked out. So
yes.
So the next question is really to helps us to frame people that might be interested in, as they come along considering GigCX. It is really about how do you see or how do you come up with the idea of using Gig for driving better engagement for Microsoft community? Because you said at the start there that you've got a bunch of people that were already on there being, I guess, paid to work. They're on the platform. Then you've got those that are turning up on their own free will, if you like, altruism, and they're doing a great job. So what was it that you looked at? How did you come up with the idea of, okay, let's try this thing out and see if it improves? And Creech, I'll probably come to you for that one.
So Microsoft's had a program for a while of trying to explore how we can integrate Gig. A lot of Gig workers are in disadvantaged areas, or they're maybe in a challenging situation where they can't have a traditional, like, go into a call center and work kind of part of their life. And when I was first hired, there was a very, very large conference that we all went to that we just don't do anymore because of COVID. But there were people from all around the company just digging into different ways we could be more efficient with our resources and how to serve our customers better.
Yeah.
And Gig was the answer to a lot of those questions. And in the community in particular, we have the ability at some level to kind of pick and choose, where we can say, we love our volunteers. They do a great job. Let's, support them and give them the first pick, right? So they kind of have the ability to choose anything that they want to answer. And we trust the volunteers, and it doesn't go any further. But then everything that's left gets sent off to Gig, and it's been an amazing response. It's so much faster than we were doing before, which matters. When a customer has something and they're getting an error and they don't know how to fix it, like, they can't use their computer until it gets fixed. Speed matters, right? They need that response sooner rather than later. And that's been just dramatic. Like this response time, Dennis could probably correct me on this, but it was over 24 hours before, and now our average response time is like 50 minutes or something ridiculous. So huge improvement there.
And you mentioned there that one thing that whenever we talk to people about how this works in a community environment, some people are like, well, I've got a community, it's already working. Why would I need to pay people, and how would they work alongside? So what would your it sounds there like, so if I get that correct, then what you have in your setup is the first dibs, if you like, come to the volunteers, that the community experts that were on there before, or are still on there now, and it's only those that don't get answered in a certain time frame, and that triggers it then to go into then onto Gig. Right. Okay.
Right.
So you're not changing the availability for those that are working on that platform in that same way. The ones that are doing it in their free time, and the ones that want to do it, it's just their hobby, right? Because that's one of the great things about a community. So you're not changing those guys. What you're doing is saying, well, if those don't get answered, we want the question answered. So we're then going to move it to the next resource pool, and that resource pool is Gig. Correct. Which is the okay, cool. That really helps. So go on, Dennis. You've got something.
Yeah, I was just going to chat. I think, and it depends on how you want to run your community, because every company is different. Sometimes it's just an opportunity for people to interact with each other. For Microsoft, it's actually a key support channel, and so and the one unique thing about community is it's both what we call help me and empower me. So not only can I ask my personal question there, get an answer like I would on phone or chat or email or something, things like that, but it becomes, because it's publicly available, it's a resource for me to find my answer myself. And so we have millions of people a day who actually do that, because that question's already been asked by somebody else oftentimes, and they feel comfortable to go through and do it. And we get such big volume, and because in our community, we do care. It is a support channel, and so we want those customers to get answered, because if they don't, they'll pick up the phone. A, we want them to get answered, but B, it'll just overflow to our other channels. And so we care about the answer rate and response rate and things like that. And so we're so big that the volunteers can't do it. And so whenever we get more volume coming in, it's just hiring more advocates, which is slow. It's not as successful. It's way more costly. And so Gig became this way to say, hey, what's a way for us to expand with higher quality when we get these fluctuations and when we grow, which we've been doing. So
seasonal variances are also so much easier to handle with Gig.
Right.
Look at the holidays with Xbox, right? You've got this huge rush for about a 3-month period, and it happens to coincide with the time where a lot of passionate gamers, maybe take vacations because of the holidays, and so they have some spare time, and they can hop in, answer a couple of questions, actually get paid for it, and it handles our rush, and we don't have to hire a whole bunch of advocates just for 3 months who then become unemployed. So it's much better for everybody, really.
Yeah, it soaks up those peaks, and often we see that there's like you say, you're either trying to onboard people to cope with the peaks, and then you've got all that time to hire and train and get ready, and then you've got to let them go at the end of it, and it's a lot of additional support in the background, right? And it's funny because whenever I've sort of talked to people about GigCX generally, I use community as kind of the description. And like I said, well, if we're used to like a forum environment, which is people have got the knowledge, they're generally a customer because, or they understand it to a level of, satisfaction. They want to work on their own time. They come in from work and it's their hobby. They go onto a community forum and they're answering other people's questions. And of course that's digital. So that's everything that GigCX typically is anyway. But often what sometimes doesn't happen, and I'm not, this isn't Microsoft, I'm talking more generally about some other forums, is that it can sometimes be a bit of the Wild West, right? Sometimes the posts on there and the answers can be unmoderated, right? Some can go a little bit out of brand guidelines, shall I say, and often it can be, it moves into that area is a little bit murky. And so but if you were to use an outsourcer, for example, right, you've got people that are going to be held against an SLA, they've got KPIs, and they've got other performance stats, right? And there's people being paid at the end of the line. But what they may not have is the brand knowledge or the product knowledge, because they're there potentially to just do a customer service job rather than I know this product inside and out. So for me, it's like this marriage between those that are doing it anyway on their own free time and they've got that capability, but then you actually take the contact center metric approach, if you like, around being able to professionalize it slightly more and meet the two in the middle. And that's often what we use in the outside market to describe what GigCX is totally. But the fact that you're using it within the community environment as well is the absolute, is the utopian state. And we're so pleased that it's going so well. So next big question for you is, because it's obviously doing so well, is where do you think? Well, firstly, let me ask you two questions, actually. The first one is, where do you think it will go anyway? So GigCX as a kind of thing, and where do you see it going in your organization? So Dennis, let me come to you first around the first question. What do you see is the future for GigCX generally?
Well, we're fairly mature because we've had it for so long, and so we're covering all the languages and all the products right now. So in our particular space, there's not a lot of new area we've uncovered. One of the things I think is also really cool is it does allow us another model for paying our volunteers.
Yeah,
kind of, but those people are doing it for altruistic reasons usually, but sometimes they would like to get compensated for that. Most of the time, actually, they don't. But it allows us to offer them through the gig supplier another avenue if they want to go answer questions and take it from a compensation perspective. And so that's something we've done that I think we'll continue to keep doing. From where will it go? One of the big, super hot topic right now is AI, and I think that will affect gig in a lot of ways. Some of them, maybe we think of as negative, and some of them I think will be more positive. It's really emerging, with ChatGPT coming out in the last 2 months, and I think we're 5 to 10 years farther ahead, I think, than we thought we would be at this point. All of a sudden, so everybody's scrambling to figure out, like, what do we do? Can we use this? And so we're doing some experimentation in that space. But I think that's going to be a game changer in so many ways. And it'll impact GigCX as well. I kind of think about it like the transition last century from horse and buggy and horsepower to the internal combustion engine, and it just changed so many things. Some of them were obvious. You need better roads, and you need rubber for tires, and a lot of things came on. But there's so many things we didn't impact. I mean, the concept of a roadside hotel didn't really exist before. Things like that. So there's all these things that are going to happen, I think, driven by AI, and in some cases it'll reduce the need for GigCX just in terms of overall heads, but it also provides opportunity for me then to be in a space where I might have less subject matter expertise, and I can use AI to help customers. So that's going to expand. So that's for me, that's the hot topic we're spending a lot of time in right now, trying to figure that out.
Yeah, well, it's as where are we today? We're at the end of February, and it is right in the center of everyone's conversation right now. And it's everywhere. It's absolutely in every conversation, and it's been like that for the last sort of few weeks or so. Creech, what's your perspective? Where do you think this is going to go?
So internally,
like
a little addendum to Dennis there. The one part of the forum where we don't really use gig right now is commercial. Right? We're primarily a consumer-facing forum, but we do support some commercial customers, and right now we don't use gig for that. And so I'm working on exploring, like, would that be a valid use of gig? Commercial is much more niche than the consumer products, so we'll see if it works out to be applicable, but it's something we're actively investigating now. So that's where it would go next in our org, I think. In the larger community, yeah, I agree. AI is going to be upsetting. Some apple cart will be upset along the way. I don't know whose, and we'll see. But I do think that whoever can figure out how to integrate it seamlessly in a way that helps people do their job better rather than replacing people doing their job, I think is probably the winner. Especially from what we've seen, where one of the biggest things with the public beta of ChatGPT, it's based off a very limited, somewhat limited data set at an end date, right? And it's wrong sometimes. And so you have to have somebody who knows, well, is this right or is this not, for it to be useful to a customer. We can't just blindly say, oh, hey, let's just take this wall of text that this thing generated and give it to the customer and say, oh, this is going to solve your problem. We don't know yet. Right. So there's a lot that has to be involved in that. And I think the human touch is not going to go away anytime soon. Right. That's my opinion. So.
Yeah. It might just be moved into a different part, you know, or, you know, when I remember when I've been in the customer service technology space for quite a long time, actually. And I remember like the first time, an IVR came out, and the first time then a natural language IVR came out. And then the first time when things were not just phone and email, there was this messaging capability, and these big, and I remember these sorts of conversations at that time. It was like everyone running around going, oh my god, what we're going to do? There's this thing where you can call up and it automates everything, and then it's great, and then you call up and then nothing understands you, and then it takes a long time to train it. And now obviously the pace of that has increased, but it feels like one of those big crossroad moments that's going to change things, but perhaps not in the way that people might be so concerned about, in the sense it removing jobs, but it might just add either more help to people to do their jobs, or it might take some like contacts away, as long as you've got confidence it can do the thing it needs to do. And then you pivot those people to work more on the complex cases. And in a world where supply is becoming a bit harder to find, the subject matter expertise, and to keep them engaged and focused on stuff, there's benefits to this. Now that might be me with my rose-tinted glasses on, but you can see there's this battle for the space in that initial, those sort of level one inquiries, right? The ones that are, someone could find the answer, or you can use a virtual assistant, or now with things like ChatGPT or further AI, that they're starting to conversationalize some of those answers back in a way that makes it more useful to the customer. So some of those stuff goes away, but then you've still got more products coming out with more complexity, with more things that they then go and talk to. You've got these bigger ecosystems that all these new technology products come out with, and every time a new product comes out, it hasn't got the same number of features as the previous version. It's got probably double, and it's got more things it needs to talk to. So there's more stuff that comes. So really all it's doing is shifting some of the demand, in my humble opinion, to be in more of the focus categories, which should we call it. Let me move on to a slightly bit more ethereal question, more than anything else, which is to do with because again, we use GigCX a lot interchangeably, and the word gig can have, in my experience, sometimes it can be polarizing, actually, because people have their own relationship. So, in your opinion, is there a stigma associated with the word gig? We use it obviously for GigCX. Do you think there is a bad word? Do you think there's a stigma associated with it? What's your opinion? Creech, I'll come to you first.
That's so context dependent on who you're talking to. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Doesn't mean they're all as applicable to, say, me and the environment I live in. So, I think it's more important to understand how to explain a gig with dignity, right? That's how I think of it.
Gig with dignity, I like that one.
Yeah, so that people can see that it isn't just corporations taking advantage of employees or non-employees in a way to avoid paying or whatever, right? Because that's not what it is. No. I mean, I'm sure there are companies out there that's their focus, right? Is exploitation, whatever. But that it's not Microsoft. It's definitely not any partner that we're aware of, because we wouldn't be partners with them. So I think it's giving people tools to be successful when they don't fit readily into the traditional role, whatever that role is. It gives people a little bit more ownership over what they choose to do at any given moment in the day. Gives them some power over their work life that maybe they wouldn't have in a traditional, like, oh, well, I'm going to go work with these same skills in an advocate call center. You'd be successful. If you're successful as a gig, you'd probably be successful as an advocate too. It's the same knowledge. But maybe you don't have the ability to go, and maybe like you don't have a car, right? So you can't commute over to here, but you have internet, you have a phone, you have a computer, and you can sit at home and help people and take care of of customers' needs, help the company out, and you can pay your bills at the same time. So I think it really is being able to explain it in a way that shows the benefits to the workers, not just companies. Because I think that there's been a lot of press about, oh, it's good for companies because it saves money. Well, I mean, we saved money when we started using Gig, but we got so much better customer service out of it. That was really the key story for us internally. We talk about that a lot, much more than we talk about, the dollar savings.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we that's amazing you say that. I remember actually there was this program in the in England, Panorama. It's one of these programs that comes on, and there's like this panel. There's a big audience and there's a panel, and the panel are typically made up of members of the parliament and some sort of industry experts and things. And one of the topics was to do with the freelancer economy or the gig economy, and everyone on the panel was saying it was bad. It's bad for economy. It's bad for service. It's bad for brand. It's bad, because it's exploitation. And then you turn around to the audience, and there was about 20 people all had their hand up, and they sort of walk around with the mic, and everyone in the audience were like, "Yeah, but I really enjoy doing this. Like, I'm a driver. I'm a delivery. I host. I do these things, and I work on these platforms." And that just showed you that the speed, in my opinion, of not only how quickly it's gone through our economy. If you think about how long the freelance economy has been around against the backdrop of traditional working environments, sped up with COVID as well, that people just like, well, we want to work in this way. This is better for us, and it's not just the flexibility. We as you know, we do a survey each year. We do this big report, and we ask them. We've got thousands and thousands of experts that work on this platform, on Microsoft and others as well. And we ask them these sort of questions. What is it? Who are you? Where do you live? How old are you? What sex are you? What job do you do? Another job? Have you ever had another job? And the answers back are people that we enjoy doing this because I like to help people. I'm a stay-at-home parent. I'm a retiree. I'm a student. I do this as a side hustle. I like to fit it around other things. I genuinely like to help. That's the common theme around all of this. It's never, I can't get another job, or I don't want to work in this way. It's always, it just fits their own life, which is this fundamental shift from where I've been in work, and we've all been in work for such a long time, which is you bring people to the work. And you go, right, there's your work, sit down there. And now because of technology and things like this, we can broadcast the work to the people, and they don't have to go anywhere if they don't want to. And that makes it a democracy of work, and we're democratizing the availability of work. And when you break it down to further, which is it's on a task level, it's not like you've got to turn up and sign a contract to work 40 hours a week. It's like, do you want to do this job for 10 minutes and earn $5 or whatever it might be? And that is just is the biggest shift in terms of the way that the gig economy has changed the way that people work. And I wonder if when my daughter turns 18, and I'll say to her, yeah, so when Daddy was younger, he used to go to a building. He used to get in his car, it was a petrol car. He used to drive to a building, and they'd sit him down for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And you just you tap a laptop. It's like, why would you do that? That's just insane. Because you just think that every year that comes on, that people hit the working age, they're going to be like, well, I don't need to do that. I can work anywhere.
Especially if you love to travel, gig work is great.
Yeah.
Right. You can go, and as long as you have internet access, you can do the same job in Hawaii or Fiji or wherever it is that you want to kick back and still get paid. So
yeah, I think there is some stigma, I think, because a lot of the scale that people are familiar with happens at the lower barrier to entry. So where the like subject matter expertise and the skills you need to have are not necessarily as deep. So the things like Grubhub and Uber and Lyft and that's where people are most familiar with. That's the ones they use the most. It's just large scale. But on the higher end, we call it consulting. So it's has a better label to it. But in many ways, we've done consulting. Every company will hire consultants for a lot of things, and it's just a different flavor of gig in many ways. So
that's an interesting point. I've never thought about it like that. We're allowing brands to hire consultants.
and we just label it differently. And so, most people's familiarity with gig is relatively new. And again, from a consumer perspective, to have Grubhub and get my meal delivered to me, or be able to get Uber instead of a taxi. And I mean, that's pervasive now. And so everybody consumes those kinds of services. So that's their familiarity. But like I have friends who are musicians, and so their gig to them means I got a gig, I got a gig tonight. And it's a different thing. It's a positive thing,
Yeah. That was the original. I mean, that was my first understanding of the word gig. It was like someone playing in a pub, Yeah, or a bar,
Yeah.
Well, I've got another big question for you, and it's probably no surprise that before we do these, we sort of maybe put a couple of questions to you so you know what's coming. But there's one that I'd like to just ask you actually, which is anyone listening to this that thinks I'm possibly interested, what would your advice be around looking at gig and thinking about it? How would you advise them to look and bring gig into their customer service environment? Who wants to take that one?
Creech, you take that one first. I got a thought on that one, but you go first.
I would say probably go for it, but do it thoughtfully. Look at what I'm going to steal Dennis's thunder here, but make sure you can identify what problem it is you're trying to solve with that. With us, it was really clear. We had a really long response time that Gig's push model was going to solve for us, right? Because instead of the questions passively sitting on the site and somebody having to go and scroll and find and say, okay, this one hasn't been answered, let me see if I can do it. Instead, with Gig, your guys' software will push a notification out to somebody's phone or their desktop and say, hey, here's a customer who needs your help right now. This is all on you. Go take care of them. And we didn't have that before. The speed of that first response is really important to customer satisfaction. And that was the problem that we solved that made a huge difference. Far beyond anything else, that it was that speed, being able to proactively push and notify somebody that, hey, here is work that needs to be done. So I would say just really, you have to understand your business, which hopefully you do if you're in that business, but set yourself a goal of trying to understand what you really want to change. For us, the speed of response was probably the single biggest thing that we could have done, and Gig solved it perfectly. So.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's as Creech said, know your problem. So really be really clear in your own mind of what you're trying to solve. I think the advice I would give is be really clear on how much you care about quality, which is a hard thing. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction is, I care a lot. I care a lot about that. And like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. So it's like, how much, and what does that look like? For us, one of our key KPIs was customer success. So basically, the person who asked a question, how successful were they? And my belief, my sense is the more difficult the topic you're having your gig workers work on, the more subject matter expertise and real world experience they need to have, the more you as a customer have to roll up your sleeves and be prepared to partner with your gig supplier. I mean, it's unfair of us to ask Limitless to say, hey, vet these people and make sure they're experts in this and that they're really, really great. And just keep monitoring that. In a perfect world, that works. And if it's a low barrier to entry, it's very possible. But the harder it is, the more I think you have to be prepared to invest in that partnership with your supplier. And I think that's critical. And it was something we didn't understand right up front. We thought, we'll outsource this and these guys will take it and they'll bring all these great people in. And there were some great people that came in, and there was people that were not so great. And I think as a gig supplier, you guys have lots of great expertise areas. One of those is not our product. So you don't necessarily know if they're great or not. We try to partner a little bit on that, but the ability to really monitor that and figure out how you're going to measure that and look for that, give the feedback to your partner is really critical. If it's not the most important metric for you, then you may not have to invest in that. Like if we just had a community where we said, hey, people talk to each other, get your problem solved. Great, knock yourself out. We wouldn't worry about it as much.
Right, got it. Okay, that's very interesting. There's some great takeaways there. So Well, so clearly, get a clear understanding of a problem, so you know what it is you're going to try and fix, and answer the question, which is how important is quality to you on a proper scale, right? How do you really want to rate quality, because it drives the behavior, and then just go for it thoughtfully. I think you said Creech, and you said gig with dignity as well. I've got some great little snippets here. We're gonna write these down. We can see some marketing stuff come out of that. Gig with dignity. I think that's my favorite one. Well, look, I'm not going to keep you anymore, gentlemen. We really appreciate your time. And Dennis, as we were talking offline, it sounds like you can become our next gig expert around Microsoft Excel products. I'm in with the governor, all right? So if you
really
Awesome.
knowledgeable, he's pretty close to retirement. He's going to be bored.
you are
Fits that,
absolutely
yep.
Candidate. Oh, and he loves to teach, so it fits right into that. Yeah, I mean, Dennis,
Honestly,
there you go.
There you go. I got my next job all lined up.
There you go.
My next gig.
Your next gig.
the next gig. Bam, there we go. Well, what a great time to end it. Look, thank you again, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
and,
Chris.
thank you. And we look forward to welcome everyone on the next show. Until then, good night.
Cheers.